Today we're going to discuss mood, emotion, and affect, and the role of exercise. So first let's start with the main differences. These terms are often used interchangeably, but they actually have distinct definitions. First we'll start with affect. Affect is a broad range of feelings that people can experience. It encompasses both moods and emotions. An emotion, on the other hand, is an intense feeling that is short-term and is typically directed at a source. Mood is a state of mind that tends to be less intense than an emotion and does not necessarily need a contextual stimulus. This can last hours to days. So to think about the distinction, it's easy if we just put it in an example. Okay, so an overall affect encompasses both your emotions, like how are you currently feeling right now, and your general mood. So it's an overarching term. An emotion is something you can usually pinpoint exactly, right? Like, I feel sad because this happened. I feel exhausted because of work. I feel very happy because I just got a text. A mood is very, very general, and you might not be able to give reason as to why you feel that way, right? Like sometimes we wake up and we're just in a generally good mood. Sometimes we wake up and we're a little on the worse side, right? But we might not be able to pinpoint the reason. So emotions, you can direct at a source. Moods are just general. Emotions can turn into a mood state when they're unattended, right? So if I'm in a bad mood all day, or excuse me, if I'm feeling negative emotions all day, that can eventually turn into a bad mood. Moods can affect a person's emotion and emotional intensity, right? If you're already in a bad mood and something causes you to get even angrier or even sadder, something like that, or more agitated, it can intensify the emotional reaction. So both emotions and moods influence one another, especially when you leave them unattended or don't directly recognize them. So moods are less specific than emotions or affects, and they are less intense and less likely to be provoked by an event, right? They're often described as either having a positive or negative valence. Okay, so valence would be positive or negative emotion. So you're usually in a good or bad mood. We look at it on a scale. And this differs from temperament or personality traits, which are long-lasting, but personality traits, for example, optimism, may predispose mood. Okay, so you might be, if you are an optimistic person, you might have more good mood days than bad mood days. Whereas if you're more neurotic, you may have more bad mood days. Long-term disturbances of mood, such as clinical depression or bipolar disorder, are considered mood disorders. And as we know, these are pretty common. Mood can often be inferred from posture and other behaviors. So you might be able to read someone's mood just by looking at them. We can be sent into a good or bad mood by unexpected events, and I'm sure you can think of some examples for this. So mood and memory play an interesting role. Mood congruence, when you have an equal situation or an equal relationship, where mood states prime the recall of memories of similar affective valence. Okay, so this is saying when you are in, let's say you're in a negative mood, okay, an event occurs, let's say you're in a negative mood during class, right, and you're learning information while you're in a negative mood. If later, when you're tested on that information, if you were also in a negative mood, you'd be more likely to remember the information you learned in class. Okay, so if you're in a congruent mood state, you're more likely to recall the information. You are also more likely to recall information based on the mood you're in. So if I give you a list to memorize of positive and negative affective words, right, like happy, sad, miserable, angry, if you are in a happy mood, you are more likely to remember the happy terms. And if you're in a negative mood, you're more likely to remember the negative terms. So mood congruence plays a large role in memory. Positive mood, usually considered a state identified cause. People cannot pinpoint exactly why they're in a good mood, right? You just are. Sometimes you just wake up like that. People seem to experience a positive mood when they have a clean slate, right? Have a good night's sleep, and feel no sense of stress in their life. Positive moods have been shown to enhance creative problem solving and flexibility, yet careful thinking. Positive mood has also been shown to facilitate resistance to temptations, especially with regards to unhealthy food choices. Right, so this is very interesting, especially for you exercise science majors. Right? If you're in a better mood, typically, you're more resilient to temptations, which are affecting us every single day. Positive mood is also associated with implicit use of distraction. Individuals in positive moods show disrupted performance when distracting information is present. Okay, so this is saying that the more positive your mood, the more likely you are to become distracted by things. So you can see in the image, I think this is a good example, right? If you're in a good mood while you're working on homework, you're more likely to be distracted by your phone, people talking to you, the television, etc. So now let's talk about negative mood. Negative moods can affect an individual's judgment and perception of objects and events. So this shouldn't be that surprising. If you're in a negative mood, you're probably going to interact a little differently. So here we're going to talk about one way. So an overactive strategy. This is one maladaptive negative mood regulation, which is an overactive strategy in which individuals over-dramatize their negative feelings in order to provoke support and feedback from others and to guarantee their availability. Right? So if we put this into a situation, right, something happens and you get put in a really negative mood, right? So you start to be very dramatic and really emphasize your emotions or the situation that happened. Like it was just so terrible, right? You're trying to get sympathy from people. So you're trying to provoke this support, get people to feel bad for you, or get people just to listen to you, and you're trying to encourage feedback, right? You want people to listen to you and talk to you about what's happened. The other strategy is a disabling strategy. Here, individuals suppress their negative feelings, right? So it's the opposite of the one above, and distance themselves from others in order to avoid frustrations and anxiety caused by others' unavailability. Okay, so with overactive strategy, we're being dramatic, we want attention, and we want people to take the time for us. In disabling, we're suppressing, we're hiding ourselves away because we don't want people to not be available for us. We want to avoid that rejection, pretty much. Negative moods have been connected with depression, anxiety, aggression, poor self-esteem, physiological stress, and a decrease in sexual arousal. Although negative moods are generally characterized as bad, not all negative moods are necessarily damaging. Okay, so just because you are experiencing a negative mood doesn't mean that the whole situation is negative, and we'll explain that in a second. But it is important to take note of this first bullet, right? Negative moods are connected with your mental health, okay? And it can lead to serious damage if it's not attended to. So here's an example of how a negative mood can be long-term beneficial. Okay, this is a negative state relief model. It states that human beings have an innate drive to reduce negative moods. Right? Naturally, we don't want to feel angry or sad, right? We want to feel happy. So it's an innate drive. We want to reduce any negative moods we feel. People can reduce their negative moods by engaging in any mood elevating behavior, and these are called mood repair strategies. So an example of this could be a helping behavior, as it is paired with positive value, such as smiles and a thank you. Okay. So again, from the top, so we naturally just want to improve our mood. We don't want to have negative moods, and we can improve our mood by helping others. Thus, negative mood increases helpfulness, because helping others can reduce one's own bad feelings. So here we have an example, which is a little extreme, but it's a good example. So first, a person observes an emergency, maybe a car accident. Okay. A negative affect is induced. So all of a sudden you feel bad. You might feel really sad about what you just saw. And then in order to reduce the amount of negative emotions you're feeling, you're going to elicit or exhibit, right, do helping behaviors or other mood elevating behaviors to reduce your own negative affect and to make yourself feel better. Okay, so if I witness an accident, I get really upset really quickly, right? My negative affect is induced. I want to help to reduce some of that negative affect. So that's not saying that you don't want to help because you just want to help, right? But that your innate drive is to help so that you feel better. So what do you think affects your mood the most? Right? Everybody has their own individual moods, personalities, etc. So what can put you automatically in a really bad mood? What about automatically in a really good mood? Okay. So now we're going to talk about a few of those things. So the first thing, probably the most important one, is a lack of sleep. Okay, lack of sleep greatly affects one's mood. Again, remember, mood is your general emotion kind of for the whole day. So studies have shown that even partial sleep deprivation has a significant effect on mood. University of Pennsylvania researchers found that subjects who were limited to only 4.5 hours of sleep a night for 1 week reported feeling more stressed, angry, sad, and mentally exhausted. When the subject resumed normal sleep, they reported a dramatic improvement in mood. So as you're probably well aware of, right, sleep is extremely important to overall health, right? Mental, physical, all of the health, right? It's very important for wellness. So even just being partially sleep deprived can have a significantly detrimental effect. And as college students, you're probably not getting enough sleep on average, right? So not only does sleep affect mood, but mood and mental states can also affect sleep. So it's a reciprocal relationship. They affect each other. Anxiety increases agitation and arousal, which make it hard to sleep. Stress also affects sleeping by making the body aroused, awake, and alert. People who are under constant stress or who have abnormally exaggerated responses to stress tend to have sleep problems. Okay, so if you're already very aroused, right? And arousal can mean a lot of things, but in this case it means like you're just very awake or alert, right? Like if you were to see something that scared you, you'd become very aroused very quickly, right? So if you're already agitated, aroused, it's going to be harder to sleep. And then the lack of sleep is probably going to affect your mood. Difficulty sleeping is the first symptom of depression. Studies have found that 15 to 20% of people diagnosed with insomnia will develop major depression. While sleep research is still exploring the relationship between depression and sleep, studies have shown that depressed people may have abnormal sleep patterns. Right, the next thing that may affect your mood is nutrition. This is one that I think often goes overlooked. So just like an expensive car, your brain functions best when it gets only premium fuel. Eating high-quality foods that contain lots of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants nourishes the brain and protects it from oxidative stress, the waste from free radicals produced when the body uses oxygen, which can cause damaged cells. If substances from low premium fuel, such as what you get from a processed or refined food, get to the brain, it has little ability to get rid of them. Diets high in refined sugars, for example, are harmful to the brain. In addition to worsening your body's regulation of insulin, they also promote inflammation and oxidative stress. Multiple studies have found a correlation between a diet high in refined sugars and impaired brain function, and even a worsening of symptoms of mood disorders such as depression. And there are a lot of interesting studies on this topic. If you're interested, I really recommend you look up some scientific articles. I can't remember the author, but I read one the other day showing how eating refined sugars or refined snacks, right, just for 2 weeks significantly decreased memory. So how exactly does food affect your mood, right? Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that helps regulate sleep and appetite, mediate moods, and inhibit pain. Since about 95% of your serotonin is produced in your gastrointestinal tract, and your gastrointestinal tract is lined with 100 million nerve cells or neurons, it makes sense that the inner workings of your digestive system don't just help you digest food, but also guide your emotions. So most of us know that serotonin is a drug that makes you feel happy, right? People talk about getting this from prescriptions or like hugging each other. They often mean oxytocin, not serotonin. But serotonin, again, is mostly produced in your gut, so by eating. So I often associate eating with feeling happy. So there have been studies that have compared traditional diets, like the Mediterranean diet and the traditional Japanese diet, to a typical Western diet. When you think of a Western diet, you can think of the standard American diet. And those studies have shown that the risk of depression is 25 to 35% lower in those who eat a traditional diet. And in case you're not aware, the Mediterranean diet and Japanese diet are comprised of mostly whole foods, right? Very little processed foods, very little dairy, and very little meat. These traditional diets tend to be high in vegetables, fruits, unprocessed grains, and fish and seafood, and to contain only modest amounts of lean meats and dairy. They are also void of processed and refined foods and sugars, which are the staples of the Western dietary pattern. So if you're not aware, the standard American diet is comprised of 63% processed foods. Okay, so we're already on the opposite spectrum. 25% animal products, so meat and dairy, and then 12% vegetables. And then of that 12%, half of that, so 6% of the entire diet, is French fries. Okay, so we're actually only consuming 6% what you consider fruits and vegetables. So we are following the exact opposite diet that's recommended. All right, so how does emotion play a role with exercise? Some people say they feel better after they exercise. Why do you think that is? And do you feel better after exercise? So positive psychological effects from exercise may influence an individual's future participation in exercise, as well as their adherence to an exercise program. All right, so if you were to imagine that you are one of your future clients, right, whether you be physical therapist, occupational therapist, nurse, what have you, we're all pretty related here. And I exercised once and I felt really terrible after, right? I'm probably not going to exercise or continue exercising, right? Or at least at the minimum, I'm probably not going to do that exercise again, okay? So it affects your future participation. And then when it talks about adherence, we're talking about how long we stick with it. Okay, so if I really, really enjoy this yoga class I went to, I'll probably continue to do it and I'll probably stay with it for a while. So again, we have a bidirectional or a reciprocal relationship. They affect each other, emotion and exercise. So now we're going to talk about the variation by intensity. Okay, so we're talking about how people feel after they exercise, depending on the intensity of the exercise. Okay, so there's a homogeneous effective response in moderate intensity domain. Okay, so after participating in a moderate intensity exercise, like maybe a bike ride, playing a team sport, something like that, most people feel better. There's an increase in pleasure. Okay, so when it's homogeneous, it means it's similar, right? They have the same characteristic. And in this case, most people feel better after moderate intensity exercise. However, there is variability in the heavy intensity domain, okay, or high intensity. So this would be like running or cycling or swimming. So some people have increases in pleasure, some people have decreases in pleasure. And there are a lot of variables that might affect this, right? It might be personality, it might be your fitness level, right? If I'm more fit, I'll probably enjoy higher intensity exercise, okay? Or it might just be what you're used to. So there's a variability. It is not homogeneous. But then after that, when you get into the severe intensity, it is homogeneous again. Most people experience displeasure after severely intense exercise. Now this might be like going to your absolute max or exercising until exhaustion. You truly can't go any harder, or you can't do the exercise for any longer. Okay, so when we're in moderate, most people feel better. When we're in heavy, people feel differently, and when we're in severe, most people feel worse. So if we look at this from an evolutionary perspective, positive effective response to moderate intensity exercise encourages activities that are essential for survival. Right? So moderate intensity physical activity could include like walking, maybe a really slow jog, right? Hiking, all these things that would be necessary for survival, right? Traveling, building, sitting up, standing up, sitting down, etc. Taking care of kids, picking up children, etc. Physiological factors influence the perception of heavy and severe exercise. So again, that is based on mostly your fitness level. Right? So now we're going to talk about some biological mechanisms. Okay, so the first one we have is the endorphin hypothesis. So plasma endorphin levels elevate with exercise and are thus believed to cause enhanced mood and euphoria that often accompany exercise. Okay, so this is one of the explanations for why we feel better after. Endorphins are a natural opioid, right? They reduce pain. And this mechanism is commonly described as why exercise makes you happy among the general population. However, the evidence is not very clear-cut. As with most evidence that uses humans, right, there's a lot of variability. It's hard to get like a direct answer, especially when we ethically can't like experiment on humans as well as we can like on mice. The next two hypotheses are the thermogenic hypothesis, which suggests that an increased body temperature is responsible for positive changes in mood with exercise. And this is also one of the reasons people believe exercise helps you sleep better. Okay, so when you're exercising, right, you're getting your body temperature up, and then after you stop, your body temperature goes back down. So they're pretty much saying your body is getting used to the increases and decreases in body temperature. And this is supposed to help you sleep because when you sleep, your body temperature decreases again, right? And if your body is used to the increase and decrease, it might be able to decrease better when you're trying to sleep, right? Which would put you to sleep faster. The next one is the transient hypofrontality hypothesis. And this speculates that during submaximal exercise, right, so close to maximal exercise, neural activity is downregulated in the brain areas that are not directly involved in motor control. For example, the prefrontal cortex. So I know this can be a little confusing, especially since you can't see me, right? But so this is saying that during close to maximal exercise, right? So maybe you're running. This front area, right, where your forehead is, right, your physical forehead, that's where the prefrontal cortex is. And this part of the brain is responsible for higher level cognitive thinking, right? So like planning, right? That's a higher order level of thinking. So during high intensity exercise, you don't really need this part of your brain to be working, right? You're just focusing on survival. So what happens is those neurons get shut down, right? All the attention goes to the parts of your brain that are focused on you surviving the exercise. So this down regulation of all of these emotions and thinking could make you in turn feel better after. The last biological mechanism we'll discuss is dopamine. So dopamine is part of the neural reward circuit, which is a set of brain regions involved in the perception of pleasure from rewarding experiences. And this can lead to reinforcement of behaviors involved in seeking those experiences. Okay, so this happens all the time. An extreme example would be like when you partake in some illicit drugs, right? So if you were to do a drug, you get a release of dopamine, right? You feel pleasure from it, and then you become reinforced with it, right? You want to keep going back and seeking that pleasure. So in animal studies, using microdialysis, studies have shown exercise to elicit increases in dopamine, right? We can test them and see that once they exercise, they have more dopamine. And in human studies, the results are less conclusive. So again, I know I mentioned this earlier, but it's a lot easier to test these things in animals, where you can draw their blood, right? We can put them down and examine their brain, right, their organs, etc. In humans, we can't do that, right? So in animal studies, it's a lot easier to see. In humans, it's less conclusive. More support exists for psychosocial mechanisms of mood, affect, and emotion enhancement from exercise, though likely it is the combination of both physiological and psychosocial mechanisms working in concert. Okay. So the first one is the mastery hypothesis, and this is stating that mood is improved after completing a meaningful and important task. Okay. So we know, right, especially as exercise science majors, that exercise is beneficial. Right, you probably even value it as a part of your life. So when you partake in it, you feel good, you know you've done something healthy and something that you should really do in life. Okay? And self-efficacy may moderate this relationship. So if you have high self-efficacy, you may exhibit more benefit from it, right? The next one is the distraction hypothesis. And this states that time away from worrisome thoughts and daily stressors during exercise produces the mood-enhancing effects. So I know when we did our stress lesson, when reading your journals, a lot of people stated that exercise is how they get away from stress, right? It's how they deal with their stress, how they escape situations for a little while. So again, the first one is mastery, because you've done something meaningful and important, and then distraction, you use that as a way to escape your negative emotions. So exercise influences how we feel, but perhaps not to the same extent for everybody. So here's some more factors that influence the effect of exercise. Affect, emotion, and mood are sensitive to a variety of personal factors. Okay? Your current health state, your hormone levels, and perceptions. Expectations are personal variables that can influence the effects of exercise training on changes in self-esteem, right? What you are expecting to occur because of the exercise. Experience with exercise is another personal variable that has been hypothesized as a moderating factor in the effects of exercise on affect. So for example, this is saying that exercise may improve your mood, but is moderated by experience. So moderating mean, let's say, on your left hand you have exercise, and your right hand you have a better mood. Okay, so you're saying exercise improves mood, but this is saying exercise only improves mood based on your own past experiences. So you put something in the middle. Okay, so exercise may improve your mood if you've had positive experiences with that exercise. If you've had negative experiences with it, then it would not improve your mood. Response to exercise also varies person to person. Situational factors can also influence affective response to exercise, including the physical and social environment, right? So if you're exercising in front of a group of people, you might not feel comfortable, right? Or if you're exercising and you're on a team sport and there's a large, loud, supportive audience, right, you might feel more encouraged. Characteristics of the exercise also cause variability. Examples: the intensity, the duration, and the mode. Mode meaning the type of exercise. So the characteristics can also influence the affective response. Exercise increases arousal with increasing levels of intensity, but the resulting effect hinges on the participant's interaction of that exercise. So again, if you don't enjoy high intensity exercise, you'll probably have a negative response. Or if you don't enjoy yoga, you might have a negative response. So there are a lot of studies out there that show how people respond very differently to exercise. Okay? So it's easy to think when people say, I want to lose some weight, I want to be healthier, right? Okay, go exercise. Right? But exercise isn't perceived the same way by everyone, and it's really important to remember that as future health professionals. Okay? So this is a study done by Ekakakis and Lind, and it states exercise does not feel the same when you are overweight. The impact of self-selected and imposed intensity on affect and exertion. So let's break down some of this. Self-selected means you choose the exercise you do. Okay, so if I told you guys go exercise, whatever you choose, that's your self-selected choice. Imposed means I tell you what to do. Okay? So again, this can mean the exercise type or the intensity. So I put you all on a treadmill and I said, okay, exercise for 30 minutes. You'd all be in different miles per hour, right? You'd all be on different intensities. So if I told you, okay, everybody exercise at 5 miles per hour, that would be imposed. Okay. So let's look at the results parts. Okay. The overweight women in this group, and they were overweight. There were 16 overweight women, 9 normal weight. Okay. So the overweight women in this group showed higher oxygen uptake and perceived exertion than the normal weight women during both sessions. Although the two groups did not differ in ratings of pleasure, displeasure during the session at a self-selected speed, only the overweight women showed a significant decline when the speed was imposed. Okay, so they had the overweight and normal weight women had similar ratings of pleasure, displeasure during the session at self-selected speed. Only the overweight women showed a significant decline when the speed was imposed. So this is important. So if you are dealing with a patient that may be overweight or out of shape, it helps when you let them choose their own pace, right? Because we don't know how the exercise feels, right? Or how they're perceiving it. That's really important to remember. So in conclusion, how can we encourage physical activity at an intensity that people will continue to pursue? Right? This is the most important thing. Okay? First, we want to find an exercise the patient or the client enjoys. Right? You have to enjoy it if you want to continue doing it, at least at some level. Okay? And for example, a lot of people joke that they have a love-hate relationship with running. Right? But if you want to keep running for a long time, or you want to adhere to this plan, at some level you have to enjoy it. And that's what we want. We don't want people to enjoy rock climbing but only do it like once a year. We want people to find an exercise that they can stick to and do regularly.